If there's one thing that Love Island has proven for me, is that people love to know about other people's relationships, so much so that the urge spreads even into comics, where fans have a fascination with superhero relationships that never seems to be satisfied. While couples like Batman and Catwoman or Superman and Lois Lane are iconic even outside of comic fandom, there are a fair share of relationships that fall under the radar, and that's really a shame, especially when so many of them are so damn weird. Much like in real life, both DC and Marvel are peppered with odd couples and unusual pairings that you would never in a million years place together, and yet have canonically had something together in their respective comic universes. Ranging between the unconventional to the downright illegal in some parts of the world, these relationships are a solid reminder that reality is not stranger than fiction, especially when it comes to aliens dating horses. So with that in mind, I'm Will for What Culture, and here are the 10 weirdest comic book romances you won't believe. Number 10. Namor and Sandy. There are few romances funnier than Namor, Lord of the Seven Seas, King of Atlantis, Master of the Sea, dating the daughter of an oil baron. But this is the exact scenario that Marvel cooked up for us in the form of Sandy, a human woman who Namor meets in his childhood and goes on to date when he becomes an adult. So, what happened to this romance for the ages? Well, we don't actually know. She literally just stopped being mentioned in the comics whatsoever, likely to allow Namor to continue his adulthood and continued pursuit of Sue Storm without any complications. While fan speculation is that she died of old age, Marvel's sliding timescale makes this theory less than clear. Number 9. Deadpool and SHIKLAH. For any other character, getting married to a bloodthirsty queen of the undead would seem like an absolutely crazy move. For Deadpool, this is only slightly insane, which is about his usual level anyways. Indeed, one of the weirdest things about Deadpool's relationship with SHIKLAH is maybe that it's one of the healthiest we've seen in Marvel, with him marrying her, living with her, and supporting her interests, right up until her interests happen to be murdering every human being in existence, which for Deadpool unfortunately includes all his loved ones aside from her. This conflict would ultimately break the two apart, with SHIKLAH annulling their marriage to go back to Dracula, making for the weirdest love triangle in all of comics history. Number 8. ELEKTRA and the Punisher. For all intents and purposes, there are two main things that are surreal about Elektra and the Punisher having canonically dated. The first is that Elektra is totally a criminal, and thus should be on the seemingly endless murder list that the Punisher tends to have. The second is that the pair are seemingly only motivated to be together by a shared love of fighting and murder that goes perhaps slightly too far. Really, the pair were bizarrely suited to one another right up until they had a profoundly inevitable fight, splitting them up for the foreseeable future. Number 7. Thanos and Death. For those who only know Thanos through the MCU films, it's likely that there's one small part of the comic universe that comes as a huge surprise, namely the fact that Thanos and Marvel's human embodiment of death kind of have a thing going on, which served to explain why the Mad Titan just loved killing so dang much. It used to be a pretty significant factor in other characters' lives too, as for a good while in comics, Deadpool and Thanos were rivals because the Merc with a mouth had also formed a weird sort of relationship with death. While it's completely surreal to see the Mad Titan making out with the human embodiment of death, it does make a weird sort of sense. After all, what better way to motivate a villain than by telling them that their rad, mysterious girlfriend can only show up by you murdering a ton of people? And for Thanos, who loves murdering anyway, casual sex with the embodiment of entropy after the deed is done is just a straight up win-win. Number 6. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Few lists detailing weird comic romances are complete without at least a brief mention of the fact that, in the Ultimate series, Magneto's children, Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, are in an explicitly sexual relationship for literally the entire series. While the entire of the Ultimates is weird from start to finish, there's something about having two siblings who are entirely aware of their blood ties become a couple that is just that extra step into weird than anything else. It's made twice as bizarre by the fact that it appears that every other character in the series knows about the incestuous relationship between the two. However, it is worth mentioning that this is all in a universe that is in no way part of the mainstream Marvel continuity, so any fans of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver can rest easy in the knowledge that their favourite characters merely buried the weasel in an alternate universe, which only ruins them a little. Number 5. Doc Ock and Aunt May. Although you'd assume that the relationship between Otto Octavius and Spider-Man's Aunt May would be inherently kind of gross, it's actually surprisingly pleasant, even though the pair would ultimately go their separate ways. ways. Otto is shown to clearly hold a deep and genuine affection for May, with the pair even almost getting married at one point in the comics. So what's the problem? Well, it comes along in a little comic known as The Amazing Spider-Man 699, where Otto swaps bodies with Peter, meaning Spider-Man is trapped in the villain's ancient and frail body. And as it turns out, he also has access to Otto's memories, leading to a delightful moment wherein Peter accidentally discovers a memory which appears to detail the villain having a geriatric bone down with Aunt May just before their wedding. Worse yet for Peter, the whole thing is clearly May's idea, meaning that he has to spend the rest of life burdened not just with the memories of having sex with his aunt, but also the knowledge that his one maternal figure is an absolute fox on the down low. Number 4, Hulk and She-Hulk. While you'd presume that the weirdest thing about the Hulk and She-Hulk having a romantic relationship is that they're first cousins, somehow, against all logic, the creators at Marvel managed to make it even weirder than that. Because were this weird gamma-based passion to be solely in a single comic, it could maybe be explained as some easily cordoned off madness. However, the pair have been shown to be at least exchanging radiation in both Old Man Logan and part of the 2000s Incredible Hulk annual, meaning that at least 2 people thought about the 2 green beasts getting on and thought, you know, I'd really like to make that part of reality. The most immortal horrendous line comes in Old Man Logan, where Bruce creates the single worst sentence in the human language, remarking, "Who else was I gonna mate with besides my first cousin? Bruce, anyone else. Anyone else apart from family. Jesus." Number 3, Supergirl and Comet the horse. All girls love horses, but Supergirl super loves horses. You know what I'm saying, fellas? Comet, also known as Byron, is a centaur who got accidentally transformed into a horse by the goddess Circe, proving that life is cruel regardless of how many legs you have. Byron does, however, gain the ability to transform into a human every time a comet passes by the Earth, setting up for a scenario that you can probably already predict. He opts not to tell Supergirl that he's the horse she's been taking care of all this time, instead deciding to romance her and deal with the consequences later, which he does as he turns back into a horse without Supergirl ever knowing that he was Comet, meaning the poor unfortunate woman has literally zero idea that her horse is in love with her and that she did once date him. Number 2, M.O.D.O.K and Maria Hill. The third volume of the Secret Avengers series is a hidden gem for many reasons, varying between the way it includes well-known and totally obscure characters together, and perhaps, more importantly, the way its main storyline includes a plot where M.O.D.O.K saves the world by being head over heels in love with Maria Hill, who is at this point in time the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Stranger yet, the weirdest thing about this romance is that it actually kind of works, despite M.O.D.O.K being a villainous head in a suit, and Maria Hill being one of the most emotionally repressed characters to ever grace Marvel's pages. When M.O.D.O.K saves the day from the Monster of the Week by using his strong romantic feelings for Hill to overpower it, you'd expect her to be kind of uncomfortable, but instead she rocks up at his house the next day to have a chat that genuinely sounds like she's considering trying to date the reformed villain, much to both his and our surprise. While the series ends before we get to see exactly how all this turns out, part of you leaves the comic hoping the pair get together, even if that is profoundly strange. Number 1, Captain Marvel and Stargirl. As a series that contained the vast majority of DC's superheroes, the Justice Society of America was destined to have countless weird and wonderful storylines within it. However, the romantic subplot between Captain Marvel, who you may now know better as Shazam, and Stargirl went above and beyond the regular weirdness that comic provided and created something entirely more bizarre. Because while Billy Batson was the same age as Stargirl, his superhero form looked a good 10 to 20 years older, meaning that when the other members of the Justice Society found out about the pair, they were naturally deeply concerned, as it appeared that the adult Captain Marvel was grooming this young, impressionable superhero. This left Billy Batson caught between revealing his secret identity and telling the Justice League that the hero they fought alongside was secretly a child, or looking like a huge creep to literally everyone. This problem would eventually split the pair up in issue number 59, after Marvel was directly called out by the Flash, who was also under the impression that Shazam was in his late 20s and dating a 16-year-old girl, a misunderstanding that Billy refused to correct, instead deciding to leave both the JSA and Stargirl in an attempt to try and keep his reputation intact. And there you have it, folks, the 10 weirdest comic book romances you won't believe. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at @USlyDogU. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.